In the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at how to create and draft our own bespoke pair of trousers to make our own trouser block. And today we're starting a beautiful little mini series all about how to adapt your block to create some common shapes and forms out of your trouser block. I've got 6 different adaptations I'm going to be talking you through over the next couple of weeks, and we've chosen each of those adaptations simply because they all show different types of techniques and different ways of adapting your trousers. Obviously there are hundreds of different or thousands of different types of trousers you could make, but hopefully this just shows you the common ways of manipulating your block that will give you a nice start into how to create your own trouser designs. Now this little mini series works in conjunction with the entire pattern drafting series that we've been filming here at Minerva. Now, as usual with this series, I will not be adding waistbands or a hem. We're just looking at the technical alterations that we can do to our block in order to manipulate the shape to create something new and something different. However, if you're making your final version of trousers, don't forget to add a waistband, or at the very least a facing, to the top of your trousers, and also a couple of centimetres for a hem at the bottom. Okay, so if you're wanting to adapt your trouser block and add a waistband, then please refer to videos 14 to 20 in this pattern drafting series, because the principles that I've demonstrated there in terms of how to draft your waistband for a skirt will be exactly the same as how to draft for a pair of trousers. So the principles that I've shown you there will apply to your trouser block too. Today I'm wearing the Riveling Ruffle dress by Izzy Studio, which is available on our website. We'll tag the product below the video. And also behind me here on our model, we've got the Savannah dress, which is one of our Minerva own brand patterns. So do take a look at those 2 products, which we'll tag below the video for you. As always with this series, you're going to need your standard pattern drafting tools, which are listed next to me here. I'm going to be using some fat marker pens in my demo, but at home use a nice sharp pencil to get it as accurate as possible. Now, in today's video, we are going to be looking at how to create a pleated pair of trousers. We're going to use our basic block and we're going to pleat them at the front, adding a few pleats around the waist at the top. And as you can see in the image next to me, this is how it's going to look. We're going to taper the legs in slightly because our easy fitting trouser block just has the legs going straight down, and I just want to show you how to create a bit more of a tapered look down to the ankle as well. So a couple of nice little details that we're going to go through today and some really nice techniques. So let's get straight on into it. Okay, so in front of me here, I've got my block. As usual, you can see that I've made some changes to my block, and those will be different to the changes you've got, but don't worry, the things that I'm going to show you today are relevant to your block, and the techniques that I'm going to show you are relevant to your block. So just follow step by step, and you'll have the same end result. Okay, we're going to start off by looking at the front pattern piece. So make sure that you've got your knee line marked here, and also that center line that we originally drafted on the block, which sort of cuts through this top dart up here. So on the center up here, you can see we've got 1 dart here. Now, your dart may be bigger than mine, but the overall kind of width of that is not taking out that much, is it? It's not a massive dart that we've got at the front. So what we want to do if we want to create pleats is actually add more volume into the top waistband so that we can pleat it in to create that really lovely little aesthetic. So what we're going to do with our front block is actually widen it up at the top so that we can add those pleats in. So the first thing we're going to do is to cut along the knee line, leaving a pivot point at both side seams. And then the next thing we're going to do is just cut from the waist down to the knee, leaving a pivot point down at the bottom. Now, depending on how dramatic you want your waist pleats to be and how much volume you want to take out or out of that area to create that volume around the waist, that will affect how much volume you want to add in at this point here. Now, can you see if we open this out and kind of push at this point, what we're doing is we are just creating a whole load of volume in here at that point. What I'm going to suggest that we do as a nice little starting point is that we only open it up by just 3 centimetres. So just widen that gap until it is 3 centimetres wide. Next, we're just going to extend the waistline up at the top up here, another 3 centimetres. And then we're going to extend that just down to the hip line. At this point, you're going to need your calculator. So obviously everyone's dart that you had originally is bespoke to you and different to you. So what I want you to do is to measure the width of that new dart. For me, it's now 5 centimetres. Tap that into your calculator and then add 3 for this other volume down here. So for me, my total amount that I'm wanting to remove now in pleats out of the top of my trousers is 8 centimetres. For you, it will be something different. At this point now, we're going to add in 3 pleats onto this. Obviously, you can add less if you would prefer. If you do more, you may find that you need to put more volume into the top of your waistband. But for us, 3 should be absolutely fine. You should be able to see the effect nicely. Okay, so what we want to do is to add in 3 pleats across here. In order to do that, we need to divide the waist into 4 and mark those 3 pleat lines. So divide your waistband into 4 equal parts by measuring the length of your new waistband and just divide it by 4. Then break your waistband into 4 equal parts using that measurement. For me, it's 6.6. So the first point is 6.6. The next one is 13.2, and my next one is around 20. Now, using your hip or your crotch lines as a reference, I want you to just extend those lines all the way down to the hip line, making sure that you're perpendicular to the hip line, and just dividing that waist into 4 equal parts so that we've got 3 nice pleats. It's pleat line 1 and 2 complete, and this is pleat line 3. Next, we want to work out the total amount of volume that we need to remove from the waistband in order to have a nice waistband that's going to sit across our waist really nicely still, and that is the volume that we're going to take out using pleats. So on our block here, we've added 3 centimetres of volume there, so I'm tapping that into my calculator. And then I'm going to add whatever the total distance is between those 2 darts at that point. For me, it's 5. So add those 2 together and then divide it by 3. What we want to do now is to make a pleat that is that width. So very similar to a dart construction, if we want the overall volume reduction to be 2.6, what we want to do is to offset a point at 1.3 from either side of the pleat line. Mark a point at the bottom of the pleat that is just 3 centimetres offset from the waist. Next, just draw in your pleat lines. Make sure they are 3 centimetres long. And finally, we want to mark the direction that we want the pleats to go. So usually with a pair of trousers, the pleats are kind of folded so that they face going out towards the side seam. This is quite a flattering look. However, you could just combine the pleats together to create a nice box pleat. There are so many different options that you could do. However, we're just going to do a standard one. You can play around with it at home if you want to. So mark on the pleats the direction that you're going to be folding the fabric. So for me, I'm going to fold that bit over onto that one and it's going to sit under it. Okay, brilliant. We've done everything we need to the waistband, which is fantastic. I can't wait to see what that looks like. But as we said at the beginning, we're just going to taper in our legs a little bit. I thought it was just nice to show you how to do that on this block. So really simply, all we're going to do is just to bring in our legs at this point, just by, let's say, 2 centimetres on either side. So mark a point that's 2 centimetres offset from the side seam at either point, and then you just want to sort of straighten it up to the knee line. Okay, we're going to grab some tracing paper and trace over that now, adding our seam allowances and all of our annotation together. There is no seam to the hem at this point. We're not going to add one because we're just drafting it out. Add your seam allowance to both of your side seams of your trousers. And don't forget the seam allowance is 1.5 centimetres. I'm not going to be adding a waistband to my seam line as discussed previously. I am, however, just going to draw a straight line across, all the way across. Even though there's a slight curve in that, we're just straightening it off to make it nice and neat. And then I'm adding a seam allowance to the centre front crotch curve. Draw in your pleat lines. And then annotate the direction that you're going to be sending the pleat. Add your notches. We're just going to add them at the hip and then also at the knee, just because that helps us sew it to the back leg, doesn't it? Nice and easily. Keep it nice and accurate. Brilliant. So the grain line is still following the one that we had down here, even though we've opened it up at the top. So just line your ruler up with that line and let's add that grain line in. Pleated trouser, front trouser, cut 2. Excellent. Okay, let's move on to the back pattern piece now. We haven't got that many changes on that one, so it will be pretty quick. Okay, so we have our back trouser pattern piece here. We already, when we designed our block, we already added ease into the crotch area. So this should all be fitting you like really comfortably at this point. All we need to do is we just need to remove the volume from the hem. We're not going to add pleats in at the back, we'll just keep those darts. So just working along the bottom of the hem here, mark a point that is 2 centimeters offset from the side seam hem, and then just simply draw a line up to the knee line. So simple, isn't it? Do the same for the other side, and then we're just going to cut that volume out. Great, let's add our seam allowances now to that pattern piece. Draw in your hemline exactly as it is. Add a 1.5 centimeter seam line to the side seams. I'm just going to draw in my waist seam as it is, and then draw in my darts. Draw in your centre back seam around the crotch. Grain line just follows the centre line here, which is our grain line, and runs perpendicular to the knee line. Annotate your name with the pleated trousers, back trouser cut 2, and don't forget just to add your notches in the same place as we added them at the front, which was along the knee and also at the hip line. Excellent. Let's cut that out now, and then I'm going to cut it out of calico and sew it up so that you can see aesthetically what it's going to look like when it's on. I love that moment when you pop them on and just kind of think, how would I alter that if I was going to do it differently next time, or am I happy with the way it looks? It's exciting. So let's move on and do that now. Okay, we're going to start off with our back trouser pattern piece, and we're going to start by sewing the darts up at the top. Nice and simply. I'm sure you're all familiar with how to do this now. If you're not, please refer back to video 97, where I talk you through in detail how to sew a nice dart beautifully and accurately. But for now, we're just going to pin and sew these darts together. And then once we've done that, we're then going to press them towards the side seam. Now in this video I'm going to be using contrasting thread on my machine, just so as usual you can see it on the screen above really clearly. If you're baking at home you may want to just use matching thread, of course. The other thing that I often do when I'm doing toiles is that I will also use a stitch length that is a little bit longer than the standard one, so a stitch length of maybe 3 or 4 millimeters long. And that's just simply so that if I want to unpick the garment at any point, it just makes it much easier. As this is, just a toile and we're just sort of checking the style, this is the first time we drafted it, I expect, there will be fit alterations you'll need. Because obviously, you change the way that the volume's distributed around the body, so you'd be expecting there to be slight, changes. And so yeah, a longer stitch length is helpful for that reason. Okay, so for our pleated trouser on the front, we have got these lovely pleats. And let's not forget that we are folding the pleats towards the side seam always. So on my pattern pieces, I've already annotated with carbon paper where the pleats need to go. So that makes it really nice and simple. So let's just do one at a time. So let's look at this pleat to start off with. We want to bring that bit over to there. So just pinch it in half as if it was a dart, and then just line it up nice and neatly. Pop your pin through so that it is perfectly aligned with the carbon paper dotted lines. We're then going to sew from the top down to the bottom, doing a reverse reinforcing stitch down at the bottom to hold it in place. So as you can see, we've done the line of stitches there, and on the other side it's lining up really nicely with the carbon paper dotted line. So when we open it out and we want the pleat to be pointing towards the side seam over here, it's looking really nice, isn't it? Let's repeat that for the other two pleats. Okay, that's looking really nice now, isn't it? Getting some lovely shape there. What we want to do is to press all the volume towards the centre front so that the pleats are looking like they're facing towards the side. Can you see? Just like that. So we're going to be pressing that in place just like that. And of course, once you've done one leg, you just need to repeat that whole process for the other leg too. Okay, those front trouser legs are looking gorgeous. Let's sew the legs together next. So you can pop the one of the front legs down the table with the right side facing up. And then we're just going to go and grab one of the back legs and pop it over with the right side facing down so that the crotch seam lines up over here. And we're just going to pin the inner seam together now. Don't forget that you've got your notches that you can line up and pin first, and obviously your hem. Once you pin the inner seam, just twizzle the fabric round and let's pin the side seam using our notches as our starting point for our pinning. Pinning the notches first. Okay, so once you've pinned all of that in place, we're then going to sew down both sides using our 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Once you've done that on one leg, we're just going to repeat that whole process for the other leg. Don't forget to leave the left leg side seam open to accommodate your zip as well as you're pinning and sewing that leg. Okay, I'm just going to turn one of the legs right side facing out. And then we're going to insert that one that we've just turned right side facing out into the other leg so that the right sides of the trousers are together. We're now going to pin and sew the legs together at that centre front to centre back crotch seam. So this should just line up really beautifully. We've got the right sides together. We've got a couple of those little notches, the hip notch reference lines, which we can pin to in place. And yeah, it should just pin really nicely. Lovely. Okay, so that entire seam is now pinned. We're just going to sew it in place now so that both legs have been sewn together. Lovely. Once you've sewn that crotch together, and turn it completely wrong side facing out so that you can then go and press that seam open. You may well want to clip the curve down here at the bottom of the crotch. And here we've got our beautiful little pleated trousers looking really nice with a gorgeous little detail up at the top. The pleats are just holding it in place really nicely, and then it's just sort of flowing down to the hips and straight down to that tapered finish at the bottom. So I hope you really enjoyed that. It's been really helpful and that you've learnt something new today. I really love on the front leg how that kind of opens up from the knee and then up to the waist. I think that's really clever, isn't it? And when you see that for the first time, it's a bit of a like, wow, what? So yeah, that's really fun. I hope you really enjoyed it. So next week we're going to continue our trouser series. We're going to be moving on with that. And as ever, if you've got any comments, feel free to post them below the video. We always love to hear from our maker community here at Minerva. So thanks for joining me today. I've been Izzy at Minerva, and I'll see you next time.